Chapter 1034. This. Ding Xiang immediately felt a toothache. This guy still didn't give up. He couldn't help but look at Song Yun Xian for help. To be able to cultivate to this level, he didn't want to get involved in the grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Mu Bing. Although Yu Qianqiu saved his life, there were many ways to repay the favor. There was no need to throw his life away again. If he angered Wu Xiong, there was no guarantee that the hidden dragon manor wouldn't abandon him at a critical moment. Yu Qianqiu, if it was any other time, I would be more than happy to see you and Mu Bing fight to the death. Grey Cloud Xian frowned and said in a low voice, but now. Everyone is well aware of it, so there's no need for me to say anything more. Don't say that I didn't warn you. Even if you kill Mu Bing, Wu Xiong won't find trouble with you for the time being out of respect for the immortal emperor. However, after the immortal emperor's wedding, Wu Xiong will have 10,000 ways to make you wish you were dead. Damn. Isn't this bullshit? Wu Xiong still has a chance after this? I'm afraid your Song Yun Xian will be the first to come after me. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot. In reality, he also knew that he couldn't kill Mu Bing in front of everyone. Not to mention that there were a lot of people stopping him. Even if he wanted to kill him, he couldn't do it in front of everyone. If the news was leaked, even if Wu Xiong wanted to save his face, the world commerce would be the first to suffer. After all, the immortal emperor's decree was given to him. It could only protect him temporarily and not the people of the world commerce. Unless he could kill everyone present to silence them, it was a bit unrealistic. In short, if he wanted to kill Mu Bing now, he couldn't leave any evidence. As long as Wu Xiong didn't have any evidence, he would be wary of the immortal emperor and wouldn't dare to casually touch the world commerce. Otherwise, with the immortal emperor's power and tactics, he would probably turn a blind eye to it. There's no hurry to kill him now. Yu Qianqiu stared at the disappearing flowing light and narrowed his eyes. I just feel that it's a bit strange. This guy has Wu Xiong's support in the immortal world and has plenty of opportunities to earn money. Why would he suddenly come to the underworld? There's no need to go through so much trouble just to deal with me. Furthermore, he had mingled with the people from the netherworld. Presumably, the cultivation of the people around him was not low. This matter must have something to do with Wu Xiong. Otherwise, Mu Bing wouldn't be able to command the people of the underworld. Maybe there was some secret behind this matter. What if Wu Xiong did something shameful behind the immortal emperor's back? My premonitions have always been accurate. Aren't you interested in knowing? Elder Ding, follow me. I promise I won't do anything. He was speaking from the bottom of his heart. He did suspect that Mu Bing was up to something. However, Yu Qianqiu had wronged Mu Bing. Even in his wildest dreams, Yu Qianqiu would never have imagined that Mu Bing had spent so much effort to come after him. What would Yu Qianqiu think if he knew? What if Wu Xiong did something shameful behind the immortal emperor's back? Although the reason was a bit far-fetched, Grey Cloud Xian and Ding Xiang couldn't help but feel their hearts palpitate. If they really happened to have something on Wu Xiong, then it would be very useful at a critical moment. When Ding Xiang saw Grey Cloud Xian nod slightly in a non-committal manner, he immediately drove the flying shuttle and chased after him. Sect Master. Before the subordinate could finish speaking, Mu Bing immediately shouted, "Shut up." His heart was filled with hatred. Joining the Four Links Chamber of Commerce halfway was just joining halfway. If his disciple, Nan Tianlong, was present just now, he would definitely protect him and not embarrass him like this. That disciple's expression stiffened, but he still braced himself and said, "It seems like they're catching up again." Although his cultivation was a level higher than Mu Bing's, Mu Bing had a good daughter and found a powerful man, so he could only compromise. Oh. Mu Bing suddenly turned around. Judging from the vague outline of the people, they were indeed catching up again. Deng Xiang's expression slightly changed. He was actually quite afraid of death. If he had a bit of courage, he wouldn't have made a fuss and had to have his daughter come out to support him. Although he could use his connections to intimidate others, if someone really wanted to use force against him, he would immediately be afraid. The others also turned around to look. Dong Lai Shun slightly narrowed his eyes and said, "Sect Master Mu, if I'm not wrong, the purpose of your visit this time is to take the life of that Yu Qianqiu. Mu Bing swallowed his saliva. Now he was a little regretful that he came to the netherworld to find Yu Qianqiu. At worst, he could just wait until the immortal emperor's wedding. At that time, there would be many ways to deal with him. He tilted his head and smiled awkwardly. Since Mr. Dong has already guessed it, I won't hide it anymore. That's right. They have already caught up. I wonder if Mr. Dong has any way to solve the current crisis. Crisis? Dong Lai-shun glanced at him with a slightly disdainful expression. He turned back to look at the two meditation cultivators with military aura and laughed. Presumably, with Sect Master Mu's ability, you still can't mobilize the people of the Dark Army to help. It seems like it's for the sake of your son-in-law, Wu Xiong. As expected of the External Affairs Commander of the Immortal Palace. I've never heard of him having dealings with our great king. I didn't think that they would be secretly communicating. He then looked at Mu Bing and said, so it seems that Commander Wu is secretly supporting you in taking action against Yu Qianqiu. However, I'm a little curious. Is Commander Wu not afraid of the Immortal Emperor's thunderous rage if the news is leaked? You should know that Yu Qianqiu carries the Immortal Emperor's decree with him. Mu Bing's expression immediately became ugly. He didn't know where this Dong Lai-shun came from, but he knew that the two meditation cultivators with the pseudonyms of Black Big and Black 2 were indeed people of the Dark Army. Before coming here, Wu Xiong had told him that the Dark Army would send these two people to be his contacts. If he really encountered any trouble that he couldn't solve, he could ask these two people to contact the people of the Dark Army for help. Mu Bing's expression was ugly. I don't think Mr. Dong will leak this matter. Of course not. I came here on the Great King's orders. If I messed up, how would I report back? Dong Lai-shun smiled and shook his head. Sect Master Mu's two subordinates have a higher cultivation than Sect Master Mu. As the Sect Master, do you think you can order them around? Although the two people that Mu Bing brought with him didn't like hearing this, they still had to endure it. Not to mention that the person who said this was an early-stage Netherworld Emperor. He wasn't someone they could afford to offend. Seeing that Dong Lai-shun was getting further and further away, Mu Bing looked at the flying shuttle that was getting closer and closer and said with some anxiety, when I was recruiting talents, I recruited them. It's not strange that their cultivation is higher than mine. Mr. Dong, the most important thing right now is how to get rid of those people behind us. This Yu Qianqiu is famous for being a madman and is capable of doing anything. No. Sect Master Mu is mistaken. The most important thing right now is to not let others know that you are targeting Yu Qianqiu and that Great Commander Wu Xiong is involved. This is something you are doing behind Great Commander Wu Xiong's back. Dong Lai-shun smiled and waved his hand. Suddenly, his hands grew longer. His palms shot out like ghostly claws and instantly grabbed the heads of the two subordinates that Mu Bing brought with him. Puff! Their brains splattered on the spot. The two didn't even have time to scream before they lost their lives. Their corpses were thrown out of the flying shuttle by the two withered arms. As a result, Mu Bing was so scared that his face turned pale. He retreated and said in a panic, what do you want to do? Dong Lai-shun retracted his arms and his terrifying and sinister arms instantly returned to normal. He looked at Mu Bing and shook his head slightly. He finally understood why the king had sent him to do such a thing. This guy actually brought two people that he couldn't completely control. Sooner or later, Wu Xiong would be killed. At the same time, he also faintly guessed that the king and Wu Xiong might have some secret that couldn't be exposed. Previously, when he guessed Mu Bing's intentions, he thought that the king had sent him to distract Ashy Cloud Messenger so that Mu Bing could find an opportunity to kill Yu Qianqiu. This made him rather unhappy because he didn't have the slightest confidence in dealing with the Heartless Palace's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. Now, it seemed that this wasn't the case at all. The main purpose was to prevent the situation from getting out of control. As for the secret between the king and Wu Xiong, that wasn't something that he should worry about. The king clearly trusted him by sending him to do this. If he went overboard and inquired about the secret that he shouldn't know, he would be courting death. But what made Dong Laishun feel strange was that if there really was a secret, why would Wu Xiong do such a stupid thing? Because the risk of exposing the relationship between the two sides was too great. If it was just to get rid of Yu Qianqiu, the king could have sent an expert to do it alone. There was no need to put Mu Bing in the middle. Because even if Jin Tai was unhappy, he wouldn't have the ability to intervene in the underworld. Protect me. Mu Bing hid behind Black Tu, who was sent by the army of Onyx. Black Tu said expressionlessly, "Mr. Mu, don't panic. Mr. Dong has already discussed it with us before we made our move. He did the right thing. Those two people must be eliminated." You. Mu Bing looked at these people in horror. He suddenly felt like he had fallen into a wolf's den. Dong Laishun acted as if nothing had happened. Looking at the flying shuttle that was gradually catching up, he smiled and said, "Sect leader Mu is actually worrying too much. The Heartless Palace is under the control of others. Ashy Cloud Messenger doesn't have the guts to go against Great Commander Wu Xiong. According to our previous judgment, they were originally going to Twilight City. They were just continuing on their way. They shouldn't be chasing after us. But that Yu Qianqiu is protected by Ashy Cloud Messenger. It is indeed a troublesome matter. If we don't lure Ashy Cloud Messenger away, I'm afraid that we can't kill Yu Qianqiu. That 3-in-1 sword drawing style is really not something that anyone can block." Hearing this, Mu Bing gradually recovered from his fright. Thinking about how Wu Xiong had no reason to harm him, his courage immediately grew and he slowly asked, "If that's the case, does Mr. Dong have any way to resolve this?" If he didn't have scruples about Ashy Cloud Messenger, he would have already asked everyone to kill Yu Qianqiu. How could he have humiliated himself? Chapter 1035. Dong Laishun looked at the flying shuttle and smiled. With the protection of the ash-gray cloud letter, there's no good way. But we're not far from Twilight City. We'll see when we get there. There is always a way to get him away from Yu Qianqiu. Good. Then let him live for a few more days. Mu Bing gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. His resentment was not gone for a long time. Ding Xiang drove the flying shuttle and followed at a distance of nearly a kilometer. He did not widen the distance but did not get too close either. The two sides moved forward quickly, one in front and one behind. There was no surprise or danger along the way. After a full 5 days, as the flying shuttle in front slowly slowed down, Ding Xiang also slowed down. He looked back and said to them, "We have arrived at Twilight City." Needless to say, they had already seen the distant plains dotted with lights like the stars in the night sky. The area was not small, but for the underworld that was immersed in the night, it seemed a bit different. Among them, except for Yu Qianqiu, everyone had been here before, so Yu Qianqiu looked around curiously. The flying shuttle carrying Mu Bing and the others had already dived into the waning light. The flying shuttle behind them was about to land when Yu Qianqiu shouted, "Wait." Ding Xiang understood and stopped the flying shuttle in the air. Most people who came here for the first time would inevitably look at the environment of Twilight City curiously. Below was a huge city wall, crisscrossed rows of houses, and the lights shining through the windows were the little stars in the distance. There were few tall buildings in the city wall. Occasionally, a 3-story attic was already considered high. The seemingly disorderly but orderly streets were intertwined like a net. The strange thing was that most of the lights were lit in the rooms, and there were few illumination objects on the wide or narrow streets outside. In the center of the city, there was a square that wasn't small. In the middle of the square, there was a circular foundation that was 10 meters tall and nearly 100 meters tall. However, on the foundation, there was a huge snake statue that was also nearly 100 meters tall, towering into the night sky. Unfortunately, this snake-shaped sculpture was a broken stone sculpture. To be more precise, it was a statue with a snake's body and a human head. The lower half of the statue's body was supported by a snake's coiled tail. There was nothing above the shoulder. The reason why one could tell that the upper body was that of a woman was because there was a pair of large and plump breasts exposed to the air on the naked upper body. Further up, the shoulders and head were damaged for some unknown reason. The flying shuttle they were on was not far from the giant statue. It looked like a tiny dot in comparison. Yu Qianqiu stared at it for a long time and suddenly asked, Shenyu, what does this statue mean? Zhang Yunxin and Ding Xiang also looked at Shenyu. They also did not know why the statue was standing there. Shenyu said respectfully, I don't know what it means. It is said that when Twilight City was discovered, this broken statue was here, but no one knows why. Then why is it called Twilight City? Yu Qianqiu continued to ask. Shenyu replied with a bitter smile, I don't know either. I don't know who first discovered this place. Anyway, the name Twilight City has been passed down for countless years, and no one can explain what it means. It's just a broken ruin. It doesn't matter what it is called. Why do you have to ask? Zhang Yunxin said impatiently. Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to say that they should find a place to rest, he suddenly heard the sound of crashing waves in the distance. It was coming from the direction the statue was facing. Yu Qianqiu turned around and saw a strong wind blowing from afar. His clothes fluttered in the wind. He was sensitive to the humidity in the air and asked, Is there a lake in front? Ding Xiang laughed and said, It's not a lake. Not far from here is the Styx River. Twilight City is built on the bank of the Styx River. Jiu Yu added, the place directly opposite Twilight City is the widest basin of the Styx River. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and glanced at Twilight City. From time to time, he could see people flying in from all directions, and he could also see people flying in all directions. His eyes finally fell on the exquisite giant statue. Although it was broken and had experienced countless years, it was still difficult to hide its vividness. The broken statue seemed to be using the whistling wind to tell something. Glory? Sadness? Or something else? Yu Qianqiu had this feeling. He listened attentively, but he could not understand the language of the wind. It could only be understood, but not expressed. However, he did not have such a high level of understanding, so he still got nothing. After a while, Yu Qianqiu turned to look at Zhang Yunxin and Ding Xiang. He smiled and said, I think both of you have a place to stay here. Where do you think you should stay? Zhang Yunxin was silent. Ding Xiang glanced at him. He could imagine how awkward it would be to protect his enemy in front of his fellow disciples. He chuckled and said, If you don't mind, you can stay at my hidden dragon villa for the time being. After that, he drove the flying shuttle around the giant sculpture and flew diagonally forward. The hidden dragon villa's foothold in Twilight City occupied a whole street. The street was not long, perhaps it should be called an alley. Dozens of houses on both sides of the street were occupied by the people of the hidden dragon villa. It was unknown how many people lived there, but from the hundreds of people that Ding Xiang brought in front of the dragon transformation gate, it could be seen that there were at least more than 100 people. Elder Ding Xiang was sent by the hidden dragon mountain villa to guard this place. After he arranged for them to stay in a small stone house, he acted as if he had nothing to do with them. After exchanging some pleasantries with them, he said he had something to do and left. Even when Yu Qianqiu asked him to send someone to check on the situation of Mu Bing and the others, he politely refused. In fact, he did not want to get involved with these people anymore. He did not get to eat meat and almost got himself into trouble. When they arrived at the destination, they naturally parted ways. Yu Qianqiu was concerned about the location where Mu Bing and the others were staying. He could not stay idle and wanted to take Jiu Yu out for a walk. How could Zhang Yunxin let him run around? It was known that this was a place where killing was not against the law. He had no choice but to follow. The three of them went out and shuttled through the maze-like streets. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the exotic stone buildings around him. In fact, the entire Twilight City was built with large and small stones. The shapes were similar. Although simple and elegant, it was a maze. The vicissitudes of life lingered on the streets. There were almost no pedestrians on the streets. Most of them were rising and falling in the air. After walking east and west for a few streets, even Zhang Yunxin and Jiu Yu lost their way. The three of them had to fly into the air to find the direction. Yu Qianqiu looked around and finally found the place where Mu Bing and the others landed. He took the lead and flew over. Sang Xian and Jiu Yu looked at each other and immediately understood that he was still thinking about Mu Bing and the others. However, when they landed on the street, they found that it was a large main street. There were no less than 1,000 stone houses on both sides. There was no way to find where Mu Bing and the others lived. He couldn't possibly interrogate them one by one, right? It would be impolite to use their divine sense to investigate. This was the netherworld. Who knew who lived in the houses on both sides? Yu Qianqiu thought about it and decided to ask Ding Xiang for help. He had already rejected Sang Xian's request to ask the people from the Heartless Palace for help. He said that he had no obligation to do so, and Yu Qianqiu could not force him. Therefore, the three of them directly returned to the place where they came from. They broke into a house on the side and asked a disciple of the hidden dragon villa where Ding Xiang was. The disciple knew that they were guests brought by Elder Ding, so he led them to Ding Xiang's residence. However, before they entered the door, they saw a large group of people in the sky. They landed on the roofs on both sides of the street and surrounded the entire street. These people were all dressed in black armor and had swords on their waists. They stared at the people below. Yu Qianqiu had seen the same people at the exit of the netherworld. The army of the dark underworld. A surprised voice was heard. The disciples of the hidden dragon villa came out in shock. They looked at the people surrounding the entire street in shock. Ding Xiang naturally came out in shock too. He was not in the mood to care when he saw Yu Qianqiu and the others standing at the door. He walked to the street and looked around. Finally, he cupped his fists towards a person dressed like a general on the roof and said, "Oh, it's General Lu." He pointed to the people on the roofs and said, "The hidden dragon villa has always strictly followed the rules of the netherworld. What is the meaning of this? Elder Ding, something has happened around here recently. I was ordered to investigate all suspicious people. I heard that you brought back 3 strangers. Please hand them over so that I can bring them back for interrogation," General Lu said coldly. Yu Qianqiu and the others looked at each other. He must be referring to the 3 of them, this. Ding Xiang looked at Greycloud Xian and the others who happened to be standing beside him. He immediately pointed to the 3 people on the roof and smiled bitterly. "General Lu, you've misunderstood. They are not suspicious. One of them is Great Priest Greycloud Xian of Heartless Palace, the other is Sect Master Yu Qianqiu of World Commerce, and the last one is from the River Styx tribe." "How dare you!" General Lu shouted coldly. "Ding Xiang, since when is it your hidden dragon villa's turn to interfere with the army of the dark underworld? It's not up to you to decide whether they are suspicious or not. I will investigate everything. Guards, take the 3 of them away." He pointed at Greycloud Xian and the others. Ding Xiang immediately smiled bitterly at the 3 of them and slowly retreated, indicating that there was nothing he could do. A dozen soldiers immediately dashed down from the roofs. They even took out shackles and handcuffs and pressed towards the 3 of them. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he dug his ears. He wasn't afraid, but he couldn't understand how he could be so unlucky as to encounter a game of soldiers catching thieves the moment he arrived. He didn't know what was going on around him, but strangers were being taken back for interrogation. Chapter 1036. Old Song. What do we do? Yu Qianqiu bared his teeth as he looked at the approaching soldiers. He knew almost nothing about the Onyx army, and he didn't know if this damn place would capture people at the drop of a hat. He could only ask for the Ash Cloud Letter's opinion first. It didn't matter if they were to arrest him for questioning. After all, an upright person was not afraid of a crooked shadow. However, if it was easy to be wrongly accused, then he would naturally resist. After all, the number of people who died unjustly was uncountable. It was meaningless for him to join the ranks of the dead. No one has ever used torture tools on Sang Yinxin. Sang Yinxin touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist with his right hand and stared coldly at the general standing on the roof. "If you want to bring us in for questioning, we are willing to cooperate. However, if you want to use torture tools on us before we understand the situation, I will not allow it. After all, he had been to the netherworld and knew how powerful the shackles of the Onyx army were. Once they were bound, it would be very difficult to break them. If the other party wanted to play tricks on him, it would be equivalent to losing 90% of his strength. It was no different from seeking death. How could he allow himself to be restrained before he understood the situation? Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu immediately nudged the panicking Shen Yu with his elbow, signaling him to get ready. Shen Yu was now deeply depressed. He regretted setting up the mirage mist formation. Now, trouble kept coming one after another. On the roof, General Lu said indifferently, "You want to resist? It's not really resistance. I've made myself very clear. If it's just a question, we will cooperate." Song Yunxin narrowed his eyes and said, "But everything has to be reasonable. If you're being unreasonable, our Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique is not to be trifled with. You dare threaten the Onyx army?" General Lu's eyes flickered. "Do you believe that I can kill every single person of your Heartless Palace in the netherworld with a single command from me?" Song Yunxin nodded slowly. "I believe you have that ability. However, I see that you're only a beginner underworld emperor. Do you believe that once I draw my sword, you won't even have the chance to give the order?" These words were indeed spoken with the demeanor of an expert, causing Yu Qianqiu to have a whole new level of respect for him. He actually dared to say such words to the general of the army of the dark underworld, which deterred the underworld. However, after looking at the sky, he immediately understood why the old man was so stubborn. It was because he was riding a tiger and couldn't back down. At this time, there was already a large group of people standing in the air to watch the show. They were all attracted by the commotion here. The people here were all strange, and their clothes were all strange. The people of the Heartless Palace were also among them. When an elder of the Heartless Palace who was in charge realized that the main character of the commotion was actually the chief elder of the sect, he was instantly shocked. He hurriedly dodged and bowed to Qin Yun Xian. "Greetings, Great Deacon." Then, he turned to General Lu on the roof and cupped his fists. "General Lu, I think there must be some misunderstanding. He is our sect's high priest, Song Yun Xian." General Lu's gaze fell on Song Yun Xian's hand that was stroking the storage bracelet. He said lightly, "Since the Heartless Palace can testify for you, there is no need for torture tools. However, an interrogation is inevitable. If the matter has nothing to do with you, we will naturally let you go. If it is related to you, even the head of the Heartless Palace will not be able to save you. Take him away." Since the other party had made a concession, Song Yun Xian had no other choice. After all, he still had to consider the Heartless Palace. As for Yu Qianqiu, he fully believed that Song Yun Xian would not harm him for the time being, so he made do with it. As for Shen Yu, he naturally followed Yu Qianqiu's lead. In this way, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the three of them were surrounded by hundreds of soldiers of the army of the dark underworld and were taken away. Twilight City was the underground trading place of the immortal underworld and the underworld. Naturally, there was a need for people to maintain order. An army of the dark underworld was stationed here. It could be said that they had the final say in Twilight City. Naturally, the location where they were stationed was the best in the city. It was the largest stone building on the edge of the central square. The building was majestic, and the curved arched door was wide open. Song Yun Xian and the other two entered the city guard's mansion under the command of the soldier. Other people were isolated outside. The three of them were taken to the door of the prison behind the house and immediately stopped in surprise. Looking at the thick metal fence, it was obviously a prison cell for prisoners. Song Yun Xian said in a deep voice, "What is the meaning of this?" The soldier who led the way said with a blank expression, "Nothing. In order to prevent anyone from escaping, no matter who it is, they must be detained here before the interrogation." The black metal door opened. Song Yun Xian hesitated for a while, but he thought that as long as his hands and feet were not bound, the prison should not be able to stop his three swords in one sword drawing style in case of an accident. He immediately took the lead and walked in. Going down the steps of the prison door, they went deep into the large underground prison. Walking in the prison corridor illuminated by fluorescent stones, one side was a thick stone wall, and the other side was a single cell made of metal fences that were as thick as a child's arm. The gaps between the metal bars were relatively tight, and there were also horizontal bars. At most, only a fist could reach through the bars. The entire cage was a metal cage. It was likely that the metal bars were not ordinary items, otherwise they would not be able to imprison a cultivator. The more the three walked, the more suspicious they became. The prison was empty, and they did not see any other prisoners. After walking through a few more empty cells, Yu Qianqiu was about to ask, but the soldiers who were holding them down stopped first. One of them opened the prison door and shouted, "Go in." The three of them were stunned when they saw the people who were imprisoned in the next cell. It was none other than Mu Bing and the others. They saw Dong Laishan, who was sitting cross-legged, stood up, dragging the handcuffs and leg shackles. He smiled at them and said, "I thought we were the most unlucky ones. I didn't expect Songyun Xian and you to be detained. Haha. We are really in the same boat. Hey. That's not right." Dong Laishan's gaze swept over the men's hands and feet, and he immediately roared at the soldiers outside, "Why aren't they wearing torture tools?" The others also abruptly stood up and angrily rebuked the injustice, and the prison immediately echoed with their voices. The soldiers were expressionless, and they could not be bothered to pay them any attention. Songyun Xian snorted and did not say anything. Seeing that these people were also locked up, and their treatment was even worse, the three of them immediately dispelled their suspicions. Instead, they calmly walked into the cell. People were always like this. When they compared themselves, they would find their shortcomings, and when they compared themselves, they would find that they were quite good. Therefore, the most terrifying thing between people was to compare themselves with each other. Bang! After the soldier closed the door, he went to the next cell and opened it. He pointed at a person and said, "Go in order, one by one. You come out first." The person who was pointed at walked out with a face full of indignation, and as soon as the door was closed, the soldier escorted him away. As the door to the dungeon disappeared with a clang, two cells separated by iron bars could be seen. On one side, there were 3 people, and on the other side, there were 5 people staring at each other. The side with fewer people was free and idle, while the side with more people had torture tools on their bodies. It was a lot more miserable. Yu Qianqiu looked around and could not help but feel a little emotional. He did not know if it was fate with being in prison, but he could not remember how many times he had been in the palace in his previous life. Including this time in this life, it was already the 3rd time. The first time was in Kwangsung's Spirit Stone Mine. The second time was in the prison of Lus City in the Eastern Holy Lands. The 3rd time, which was also this time, was even more exaggerated. He actually came to the netherworld to be imprisoned. It was really like seeing a ghost. Could it be that he was born to be imprisoned? **T. Yu Qianqiu could not help but blurt out. It attracted everyone's attention, but no one understood what he was saying. When he turned around and saw everyone staring at him in confusion, Yu Qianqiu smiled and walked to the cell next door with his hands behind his back. He stared at Mu Bing, who was handcuffed and shackled, and said with a chuckle, "I say, Mu Bing, instead of being Great Commander Wu's father-in-law in the immortal world, you came here to be imprisoned. You really have a lot of fun." "Humph." Mu Bing snorted coldly. "Don't try to be sharp-tongued, or you'll be crying." Dong Laishan, who was at the side, immediately intervened between the two of them to be the peacemaker. He said, "Let's all talk less. Don't make a fuss at a time like this. If there's anything, let's talk when we get out." As he spoke, he tilted his head and secretly glared at Mu Bing. Mu Bing snorted coldly again and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and did not speak, as if he did not care about what was happening outside. Yu Qian chuckled in a melancholy manner and wandered around the small space in a leisurely manner. After a while, another 2 soldiers came and opened the cell next door again. One of them pointed at Mu Bing, who was sitting cross-legged, and shouted, "You! Come out." Mu Bing stood up expressionlessly and walked out of the cell door, following the two soldiers. Just like this, every once in a while, a prisoner would be taken out of the cell next door. It was only when Dong Lai Shun cupped his hands at his cellmate and was taken away that the cell next door was completely empty. The three of them looked at each other. Needless to say, if they guessed correctly, it should be their turn next. As expected, not long after, two soldiers came and opened the cell door. One of the soldiers pointed at Shin Yu and said, "You, come out." Shin Yu was instantly a little frightened. Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and smiled. "Don't be nervous, I have experience in this. You will get used to it after a few times." It's okay, you are from the River Styx's water tribe. They won't dare to do anything to you." Shin Yu thought about it and went out obediently. After leaving the dungeon, he was immediately escorted to the main hall in the front yard. The spacious hall was simple and solemn. There were 4 soldiers holding swords standing on both sides, and the general with the surname Lu was sitting behind a stone table at the front. Shin Yu stood in the hall, trembling. As he was thinking about what the other party would ask and how he should answer, he saw General Lu looking at him coldly and saying, "You are from the River Styx's water tribe. This has nothing to do with you. You can leave now." Shin Yu was stunned. He did not expect that General Lu would let him go without even asking him a question. Before he could regain his senses, a soldier in the hall shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and leave. Do you want to stay and be punished?" Shin Yu did not dare to stay any longer. He immediately bowed and hurriedly walked out of the city guard's mansion. Chapter 1037. Many people gathered outside the city guard's mansion to watch the show. No one knew why the Onyx army was going through so much trouble. When they saw that Ji Yu was the first to come out, they were surprised but felt that it was reasonable. After all, he was from the River Styx's water tribe. The Onyx army would not dare to touch him. Otherwise, they would be breaking the ancient rule. By then, even Madame Blackpool would not be able to protect them. The heartless palace elder in charge here was He Jinquang. When he saw Ji Yu come out, he immediately went over and cupped his hands at Ji Yu. "I am He Jinquang, the heartless palace elder. Sangyun Xian, who went in with you, is the chief high priest of our sect. We are from the same sect. May I know your name?" "River Styx's water tribe, Ji Yu." Ji Yu replied politely. "So it's Mr. Ji." He Jinquang cupped his hands and asked politely, "You all went in together, but Mr. Ji was the first to come out. Can you tell me what happened inside? Is our high priest safe and sound?" "He's temporarily imprisoned inside. He's fine for now," Ji Yu suddenly exclaimed. He looked around and did not see Mu Bing and the others. He asked suspiciously, "You said I'm the first to come out?" "That's right. Is there a problem?" He Jinquang did not dare to be careless. If anything happened to Sangyun Xian here, he would not be able to escape responsibility. The dark and skinny Ji Yu frowned. "Before I came out, there were already 6 people who came out to be interrogated. Did none of them come out? Why didn't I see them go back? Where did they go?" He Jinquang smiled worriedly. "The city guard's mansion is so big. They should be somewhere else for now. It's probably because you're from the River Styx's water tribe, so they don't dare to do anything to you. That's why they let you out first." Ji Yu's frown eased and he nodded slightly. He felt that was the case. In the dungeon, 2 soldiers came again. They opened the cell door and pointed at Sangyun Xian. "It's your turn. Come out." Just as Greycloud Xian walked to the door, he paused and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was alone in the cell. He frowned and said, "Why do you have to go back and forth so troublesome? Just call him and we'll go out together." What he was worried about now was what would happen if someone tried to kill Yu Qianqiu while he was away. It was not that he treasured Yu Qianqiu's life, but if Yu Qianqiu died, his own life would come to an end. The soldier immediately shouted, "Of course, there are rules for interrogation. How can we give you a chance to collude on the spot? We have to interrogate you one by one. Don't dawdle, go quickly." Song Yunshin thought about it and agreed, but he was still worried about Yu Qianzhou's safety. Yu Qianzhou walked to the door with a smile and said, "Old Song, you go first. I have some relationship with Lady Blackpool, so I don't think these little pawns would dare to do anything to me." As soon as he said that, the two soldiers looked at each other in surprise. Grey Cloud Xian was also slightly startled. He looked at Yu Qianzhou in confusion. He didn't know when Yu Qianzhou had gotten involved with Madame Blackpool. Even so, he still released his divine sense to scan the entire dungeon. After confirming that there was no one else, he left with the two soldiers with a little relief. After leaving the dungeon, he was sent to the main hall in the front room just like Xinyu. One of the soldiers who escorted him quickly walked to the side of the general who was sitting calmly in the hall. He lowered his head slightly, obviously transmitting his voice to the general. General Lu was taken aback for a moment, then he sneered and said, "What a joke. Madame is of high status and power. How could she have any relationship with him? Don't pay attention to his nonsense." The soldier seemed to want to say something, but he eventually shut his mouth and retreated. Song Yunshin, who was standing in the hall, had already guessed that they were talking about Yu Qianzhou. In fact, he did not take Yu Qianzhou's words seriously. Just think about it, he had never seen Lady Blackpool or heard that she had been to the immortal realm before. On the other hand, it was clearly Yu Qianzhou's first time in the netherworld realm. How could he have any relationship with Lady Blackpool? If he really had such a great reputation, he would not have ended up like this. Suddenly, Song Yunshin stared at the person sitting high in the hall and said in a deep voice, "Ask anything, I will tell you everything I know." General Lu nodded slightly, then tilted his head and said, "Call He Jinquang of Heartless Palace in." One of his subordinates immediately ran out. Song Yunshin looked at the hall in confusion. Not long after, He Jinquang followed his subordinate into the hall. He gave Song Yunshin a once-over and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that he was unharmed. He cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, High Deacon." He then cupped his fists and said, "General Lu, may I know what you have summoned me for?" General Lu was still wearing his armor. He sat behind the stone table in a dignified manner. After staring at the two of them for a while, he casually picked up a jade archive from the table and looked at it. After a long while, he put it down and looked at the people below. He asked, "He Jinquang, are you certain that he is the chief high deacon of your heartless palace, Song Yunshin?" Song Yunshin's gaze turned cold. He thought that General Lu was up to something again. He Jinquang quickly replied, "General Lu, what do you mean by that? If he isn't my sect's high deacon, I wouldn't have needed to step forward. That makes things easier. I'll take it that your heartless palace is vouching for him." General Lu placed his arms on the table and stared at the people below. He said indifferently, "Since you're the one who vouched for him, I won't ask any more questions. However, I'll be frank. If I find out that he has anything to do with the matter I'm investigating, don't blame me for being rude to your heartless palace." He Jinquang stole a glance at Song Yunshin. He didn't know what was going on around him, nor did he know if it had anything to do with Song Yunshin. He couldn't make up his mind if he wanted to use the lives of everyone from Heartless Palace in the underworld as collateral. He needed someone more experienced to make the decision. Truth be told, Song Yunshin himself didn't even know what was going on around him. He was caught in a daze. However, there was one thing he could guarantee. Whatever happened around him had nothing to do with him. He sneered, "You don't have to threaten me. I didn't do anything around here on my way here." Since the High Deacon had said that, He Jinquang wouldn't be blamed if anything happened. He nodded and said, "My heartless palace is willing to vouch for High Deacon." "That's great." General Lu waved his hand and said, "Since I've vouched for him, you can leave now." The matter was easily resolved. He Jinquang cupped his hands to express his gratitude. Then, he turned to Song Yunshin and extended his hand toward the door. "High Deacon, please." "No hurry." Song Yunshin pressed his hand down and stared at the door. He said in a deep voice, "Yu Qianzhou traveled with me. I can guarantee that he didn't do anything around here. Please let him go." The innocent are innocent, and the guilty are innocent. I have to follow all the necessary procedures. Otherwise, wouldn't I be suspected of corruption? I will treat High Deacon Song's words as testimony. If there's nothing wrong, I will naturally let him go. Please don't interfere with my interrogation. General Lu extended his hand toward the door and said, I won't see you out. Song Yunshin's eyes turned cold. He wanted to stay and wait for Yu Qianqiu to come out. However, a bitter expression flashed across He Jinquang's face. How could the upper echelons of the sect know the difficulties of the subordinates outside? The Dark Nether Army had already given him enough face by making concessions. If he continued to contradict them, his days here would be difficult. After all, this was their territory. The Dark Nether Army would definitely make things difficult for him. If he couldn't handle the matters here well, he wouldn't be able to explain to the sect. He coughed and cupped his hands toward Song Yunshin. High Deacon, we might as well wait outside the door. Song Yunshin was slightly startled. He was also someone who often worked outside. He was not ignorant of the difficulties of the subordinates like He Jinquang thought. After thinking about it, there shouldn't be any problems. He glanced at General Lu, who was sitting high above, then turned and strode out. He Jinquang breathed a sigh of relief, cupped his hands again, and quickly followed. As soon as they left the city guard mansion, they saw a group of people watching the show. Shen Yu, who was in the crowd, hurriedly walked over to Song Yunshin and asked, How is Yu Qianqiu? In fact, as soon as Song Yunshin was escorted out of the dungeon, Mu Bing and the others, led by Dong Lai Shun, came out of a house not far away. The shackles on their hands and feet were long gone. The two soldiers accompanying them quickly gestured for the guards to open the cell door. The group quickly entered the dungeon. Inside the cell, Yu Qianqiu was bored alone. He paced around the small space with his hands behind his back, his head lowered and his brows furrowed as he thought about some problems. He wasn't worried about any accidents at all. With his ability, this cell could trap other cultivators, but it was useless against him. He could leave at any time, and it was no different from a piece of paper. Clang! The sound of the cell door opening pulled him back from his thoughts. It was probably time for him to go to court. However, he heard footsteps along the way. It wasn't like before, where there were only 2 soldiers. There seemed to be 7 or 8 people. While he was pondering, the 7 or 8 people had already arrived in front of the cell. They were all familiar faces, and they were all sneering at him. They looked at him as if he was a pig that was about to be slaughtered. Mu Bing, who was in the crowd, laughed evilly and said, Yu Qianqiu, I told you that no matter how sharp-tongued you are, there will be a time when you cry. Even in your dreams, you probably never imagined that this moment would come so quickly. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He saw that the shackles on their hands and feet were gone, and that the 2 soldiers were fighting on the side. With his experience in this area, he immediately guessed the cause and effect. He knew that he had fallen into a trap. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly, and he said, It is indeed a good plan. Step by step, you paralyzed us and successfully made us lower our guard. Finally, as you wished, Song Yunshin was lured away. His gaze then fell on Mu Bing, and he sneered with unusual disdain, Mu Bing, it's not that I look down on you, but with that pig brain of yours and that little bit of knowledge of yours, you can't come up with such an overt scheme. So, what the F***ck are you so proud of? Chapter 1038. These words were a resounding slap to the face. Every word was like a sharp blade, stabbing into his heart. This was because this method was indeed not thought of by him. His words were like a sharp blade, stabbing into the pit of his heart. He could not pull it out even if he wanted to. Thus, his face turned green. He simply had no reason to refute Yu Qianqiu. He could only gnash his teeth and speak with a sinister expression, Yu Qianqiu, I'll let you know what it means to be unable to live or die. Beg for death? Yu Qianqiu sneered. Don't worry, no matter who I beg for, it won't come to you. He raised his hand and pinched his little finger. Who in the three realms doesn't know that you're a bastard who sells his daughter for glory? Poor Mu Tianjiao traded her body for this vanity, but you don't cherish it. You even want to show it off. Are you afraid that others don't know how shameless you are? Why don't you think about it? With your little ability, how could you find so many people to help you? Previously, he was still worried about Wu Xiong's face and didn't want to scold the couple. But now that things had come to this, the dagger was revealed. The other party had already made it clear that they wanted to take his little life. Even if he showed mercy, it wouldn't be worth a fart. Now, it was either you die or I live. There was no way out. Capture him alive. Capture him alive. I want to kill him with my own hands. Mu Bing roared as he pointed at the cell. He really couldn't find words more vicious than Yu Qianqiu's to scold Yu Qianqiu. The others looked at him with a hint of pity. Since you know he has a sharp tongue, why do you keep jumping out to provoke him? Today, I want to see who will kill who. Yu Qianqiu sneered. There was no wind in the cell, but his clothes suddenly fluttered. Boundless killing intent instantly exploded. Do you want to fight like a cornered beast? You overestimate yourself. Dong Shunlai maintained his smile, but his hands suddenly elongated and shot out like two thin bamboo poles. With a whoosh, they passed through the cage, and the two palms at the front suddenly turned into two sharp claws. One clawed at Yu Qianqiu's head, and the other clawed at Yu Qianqiu's chest. He wanted to kill Yu Qianqiu in one strike. He did not care whether Mu Bing wanted to capture him alive or not. He wanted to settle the matter first, otherwise, there would be trouble. It wasn't easy to trick Grey Cloud Xian into leaving, and they couldn't afford to waste too much time. If they waited for Grey Cloud Xian to react and rush over, and they still hadn't left, then none of them would be able to leave. The Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword drawing style was no joke. The sneak attack of an expert at the initial stage of the Netherworld Emperor was so fast that Yu Qianqiu couldn't dodge it. However, his opponents outnumbered him, and all of them were highly skilled swordsmen. How could he not be prepared when facing them alone? Thousands of purple flame high-energy sabers had been secretly arranged around his body under the cover of the explosive murderous aura. Kill! Yu Qianqiu yelled fiercely. Thousands of invisible purple flame high-energy sabers spun and attacked at the same time. Puff, puff. A series of tearing sounds could be heard. The two pairs of ghostly claws that were as fast as lightning were shredded into thousands of pieces, falling to the ground and turning into wisps of gray smoke. Ugh! Dong Shunlai let out a muffled groan. The pair of ghostly claws that had been shredded quickly retracted, and grew back at a visible speed. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he glanced around the prison. His pair of ghostly claws were extremely sharp and hard. How could they be destroyed by ordinary objects? He could clearly feel that the prison was filled with sharp objects of extreme yang, which were simply his natural nemesis. Not only him, but the others were also startled. They didn't expect that Dong Shunlai, who was at the initial stage of the Netherworld Emperor, would suffer a great loss in just one round. When the 1,000 purple flame high-energy sabers were brandished, the terrifying energy surged forward, making the ghosts and monsters of the underworld tremble with fear. Since he had already attacked, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't show any mercy based on his personality. His 5 fingers stretched out like claws toward the outside of the prison, and he yelled fiercely again, "Kill!" Thousands of purple flame high-energy sabers shot out like a rain of swords from the metal bars. However, the surprise effect had already disappeared. Dong Shunlai's new pair of ghostly claws quickly pushed out, and a black translucent wall of light immediately blocked in front of him. Immediately, the outline of the flying daggers appeared on the wall of light, and it began to protrude forward. Dong Shunlai resisted the rainstorm-like purple flame high-energy sabers with his powerful cultivation. However, the black transparent wall of light was gradually being broken through. Dong Shunlai said hurriedly, "This kid's item is the nemesis of my meditation cultivation. I can't hold on much longer. You guys should kill him while I'm blocking his treasure." He still thought that Yu Qianqiu had used some kind of treasure. The dumbfounded crowd immediately came back to their senses. Mu Bing was terrified. He didn't expect Yu Qianzhou to be so powerful that even an expert in the preliminary stage of the Netherworld Emperor realm couldn't hold on much longer. Mu Bing was slowly moving to one side, showing signs of fleeing. However, Yu Qianzhou's trump cards came one after the other. It was fine if he didn't reveal them, but once he revealed them, they were all extraordinary. How could an ordinary expert block them? If he didn't have a trump card, he wouldn't have dared to run around. Now that he had been attacked, he couldn't pretend to be a coward anymore. If he still showed mercy, he would be a pig, unless he didn't want to live anymore. For a moment, Yu Qianzhou didn't conceal his murderous intent at all. Seeing his opponents about to gang up on him, and Mu Bing showing signs of fleeing, Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened. How could he let Mu Bing run away, kill? With the third roar, Yu Qianzhou pushed out his palms fiercely, as if he wanted to rush out of the cage. His whole body emitted a dazzling purple light, and thousands of flying swords of purple flames shot out from his body, covering the entire area and attacking indiscriminately. Within such a short distance, the metal fence in front of Yu Qianzhou was instantly smashed into pieces by the sharp flying swords of purple flames. What were these things? The crowd turned pale with fright. They didn't expect these flying swords to be so sharp. They had thought that after they trapped Yu Qianzhou in the dungeon, Yu Qianzhou was no different from a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, they found out that the narrow space also limited their chances of escaping. The swarming purple flying swords closed in on a large area like a bowl cover. It was obvious that his opponent wanted to kill them all at once. The only place he could escape to was the wall behind him. The black wall of light that blocked the purple flame high-energy blade couldn't stop the indiscriminate bombardment of the flying swords of purple flames, and was instantly smashed to pieces. Dong Shunlai could no longer laugh, and his face was full of shock. He didn't know that if he was a cultivator from the immortal world, he might be able to block it with his profound cultivation. However, these flying swords of pure yang were the bane of meditation cultivators, and it was very difficult for him to block them with his current cultivation. There was a loud boom behind him as the other meditation cultivators worked together to blast a large hole in the wall. It was a few hundred meters deep, and the plaza outside collapsed as a large hole appeared. Almost at the same time that the hole appeared, Yu Qianzhou spread his fingers and used the earth's secret art. The hole collapsed with a boom, almost burying those who wanted to enter it alive. Yu Qianzhou had clearly gone berserk. He wanted to trap everyone with a mere minor immortal cultivation and fight so many experts by himself. Ah! A miserable scream came from the other side. Mu Bing's cultivation was low, and he didn't have time to dodge at such a close distance. Several flying swords pierced through his intestines, and he fell to the ground. Help! He cried out, but no one had the time to care about him. The ground wriggled and swallowed him whole. Everything seemed to have happened slowly, but in fact, everything happened very quickly. It happened in the blink of an eye. Die! Dong Shunlai roared, and his tyrannical cultivation erupted on the spot. Fierce astral energy instantly swept toward the flying swords of purple flames. He punched out with both fists, and a solid astral energy shot toward Yu Qianzhou. Immediately, the weakness of Yu Qianzhou's low cultivation was exposed. If the flying swords of purple flames had been used by an immortal emperor, they would have died for sure. However, Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was far too low compared to theirs. The fierce chaotic wind disturbed the flying swords on the spot, especially the chaotic wind formed by his fists with the cultivation of the early stage of the underworld emperor. The chaotic wind blasted the flying swords of the purple flames away in all directions. The cultivation of the early stage of the netherworld emperor realm was not child's play. Once it was displayed, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The entire dungeon collapsed in an instant, and for a moment, the earth and rocks became a blur, and the sound of rumbling could be heard. At the place where the two fists landed, the metal fences were directly broken, and the wall behind them was instantly blasted away by the unparalleled power. On the ground outside, in a straight line of 1,000 meters, all the houses made of boulders were blown into the sky by the tremendous force. A deep trench appeared on the ground. Then, countless rocks and stones fell from the sky like rain. People were fleeing in all directions. Those with low cultivation bases were not able to dodge in time. They were directly smashed into meat paste by the aftershock of the two fists that came out from the ground. A golden light suddenly appeared and wrapped around Yu Qianqiu, but he was still blasted into the hole behind him like a meteor by the heavy fists. Capture him and use him as a hostage. Dong Shunlai waved his hand, sweeping away the falling rocks and soil, creating a short gap. He snorted coldly and dashed towards the hole he had created in the ground, chasing after them. When the others saw that the purple flame flying sword wasn't unstoppable, their confidence was boosted, and they almost followed suit. The 7 of them chased after Yu Qianqiu. In the blink of an eye, the people who were watching the commotion outside the city guard's mansion were startled by a loud noise. A large hole suddenly appeared in the square behind them, and rocks and stones flew everywhere like rain. Most of the people immediately hid in the air. Waiting outside the door, Zhangyin Xian wasn't a fool. He realized that he had fallen into a trap after thinking for a while. It seemed that someone had made a move in the dungeon. Bang! Zhangyin Xian was extremely angry, and his thunderous roar shook the minds of the onlookers in the sky. Shen Yu and He Zhenquang, who were next to him, took a few steps back. Blood even seeped out of their mouths and noses, and their faces instantly turned pale. As soon as Zhangyin Xian dodged into the sky, he heard another loud boom behind the dungeon. 100-meter deep, 1,000-meter-long trench suddenly appeared. The houses that were built on top of the trench were instantly blown into the sky, and the onlookers dodged in all directions, screaming miserably. Chapter 1039. Zhangyin Xian's expression changed drastically. With his eyesight, he could immediately tell that this was the aftershock of an expert's attack. The attacker was at least an early-stage immortal emperor. Apart from General Lu, only Dong Lai Shun had such a cultivation. General Lu, who was sitting in the main hall of the city guard's mansion waiting for news, was similarly shocked when he felt the violent tremor. He got up and smashed the stone table in front of him. He looked at his men standing below and said in a low voice, "What's going on? Why did you cause such a huge commotion just to deal with an early-stage minor immortal cultivator? Are you afraid that Zhangyin Xian won't know?" Flustered and exasperated, he disappeared from the main hall in a flash. As soon as he appeared in the air, he saw Zhangyin Xian glaring at him angrily. Fortunately, Zhangyin Xian wasn't in the mood to deal with him. Saving Yu Qianqiu was his top priority, so he shot away in a flash. Golden umbrella. Dong Shunlai, who had chased into the cave, cried out. A large golden umbrella lay on its side on the ground. Yu Qianqiu was lying on the ground, hugging the handle of the umbrella and coughing. He coughed and coughed, mouthful after mouthful of blood. His entire body was enveloped by the faint golden light emitted by the golden umbrella. Although he looked heavily injured, there wasn't a single wound on his body. Golden umbrella. The people who chased after him also cried out. Although they hadn't seen the golden umbrella before, they had heard of it. It was one of the few defensive magic treasures in the immortal world. The shape of the umbrella was so obvious that anyone with a bit of experience would be able to tell that it was a golden umbrella. It's too late. Count himself lucky. Let's go. Dong Shunlai called out. They quickly shot towards the hole in the ground tens of meters away. They knew that they wouldn't be able to break the golden umbrella in a short time. If this dragged on, none of them would be able to escape from Zhangyin Xian. However, Dong Shunlai didn't give up. As he shot up, he threw a heavy punch at the golden umbrella below. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu, who was inside the golden umbrella, let out a strange cry. He had overestimated the power of the golden umbrella, thinking that he would be fine as long as he hid inside it. He didn't expect that the cultivation base of the early stage of the Underworld Emperor realm was too frightening. Even though it didn't break through the defense of the golden umbrella, Yu Qianqiu was shaken badly. If he were to be hit again, Yu Qianqiu really suspected that he would be jolted to death. How could he dare to take it head-on? Almost at the same time the heavy punch landed, he hid back into Utopia with his umbrella. Boom! The entire Twilight City shook violently. Almost at the same time, a huge hole appeared in the ground. Dong Shunlai didn't even bother to check if he had hit him. Just as he was about to escape into the sky, a mournful cry suddenly erupted from the large hole that had been blasted open. Tsangyin Exayan, F***ck your ancestors, they want to run, stop them for your father, don't let a single one of them escape. Although the voice came from underground, the hysterical anger had faintly penetrated the ground. Everyone outside could hear it clearly. Everyone could tell that it was a roar with all his strength. He really isn't dead. Dong Shunlai's expression twitched. He wanted to turn back and beat him up a few more times, but there was no time. If he didn't escape now, when would he? Tsangyin Exayan, who was rushing over, immediately understood what it meant when he heard, "They want to run." He wasn't angry at all about F***king his ancestors. When he heard that Yu Qianqiu was cursing with such vigor, his spirit was lifted. That guy was obviously still alive and didn't have time to listen to what he said next. As his eyes flashed, he immediately saw 7 streams of light shooting out from the ravine hundreds of meters away. They scattered in a fan shape and fled. It was a smart idea. It all depended on who was unlucky or lucky. Bang! Tsangyin Exayan's roar resounded through the world. He wanted to catch 7 people who were running away. He wasn't sure if he could, but he was sure that he could kill 7 dead people. Clang! A soft sound reverberated through the world. Even the air between heaven and earth trembled slightly. A dazzling white light came out from his sleeve and instantly illuminated the entire Twilight City. The people who were used to the darkness found it difficult to adapt to such a dazzling light. They subconsciously raised their sleeves to cover their faces or closed their eyes. They could only hear the roaring wind in their ears. Those who were close to the light were instantly swept away by the strong airflow. Dong Shunlai and the others who were scattering in all directions only saw a vast expanse of whiteness. They immediately sensed a powerful aura that blotted out the sky and covered the earth behind them. Looking back in fear, they saw a powerful beam of light sweeping towards them at an unbelievable speed. The aura that assaulted their faces was suffocating and forcefully poured into their lungs. They couldn't even block it. The 7 of them were scared out of their wits. Almost subconsciously, they used all of their cultivation to form a protective aura shield. However, the protective aura shield was easily destroyed like an eggshell. The 7 of them spat out a mouthful of blood and were instantly swallowed by the strong light that swept across. The 7 screams were swallowed as soon as they sounded. Many people who were watching from behind did not have time to escape. Suddenly, shrill screams rang out, but they were swallowed in the blink of an eye. Rumble. The earth trembled as if the sky and earth were about to be turned upside down. When the strong light disappeared, the world returned to calm. The people who were hiding in the air slowly opened their eyes, and suddenly became dumbfounded. Half of Twilight City, which covered an area of dozens of miles, had collapsed, starting from near the central square. Especially in the direction where Tsangyin Exayan was facing. 1/3 of the city walls that were spread out in a fan shape were instantly smashed into powder. Not even a complete stone could be seen. On both sides of the fan shape were large collapsed houses. Dozens of mountains dozens of miles away had been razed to the ground. Smoke and smoke filled the air for a long time. Tsang Yinshin floated silently in the air, silently adjusting his aura. Pulling out the sword had consumed a lot of his cultivation base. He stared coldly in front of him, his right hand holding the sword horizontally in a slanted manner. This sword was not like an ordinary flying sword. The blade was longer and wider, and the temperature seemed to be very high. It was enshrouded in a dense white mist that curled up and dissipated. Finally, the blade slowly turned from white to clear, like a pool of autumn water. At a glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary sword. Otherwise, it would not have been able to withstand such a powerful force. Could this be the Heartless Palace's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style? Some whispers sounded, and countless horrified eyes looked at Tsangyin Exayan. They were filled with disbelief. They could not imagine that the power of one person could burst out such a powerful force. Looking at the dust-filled area in front of him, there was not a single figure to be seen. From the miserable cries earlier, it was obvious that besides the 7 people who had fled, there were countless others who had been annihilated by this sword strike. In fact, Exian did not want to kill innocent people, but after the power of that sword was released, he could not control the killing range. He would not stop until the power was completely exhausted. Shinyu was dumbfounded. He did not expect to have such a powerful master by his side these days. This was the sect's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style. He Jinquang could not suppress the excitement on his face. He had long heard that the sect leader Wang Qing's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style was extraordinary, but he had never had the chance to see it for himself. It turned out that its power was so terrifying. General Liu looked at Exian with a gloomy expression. He could not suppress the chill in his heart. Although his armored subordinates were flying behind him, he knew that no matter how many of them there were, they would not be able to block that sword. In the cave below, Yu Qianqiu had just flashed out of the deep pit when he heard a thunderous roar of slaughter pushing into the distance. Even the ground was violently trembling, and the commotion was extremely frightening. When the commotion completely disappeared, he discovered that more than half of his body had been buried by the collapsed soil. He quickly flashed out, rubbed his chest, and coughed out another mouthful of blood. He spread his arms, and the scattered purple flame-flying swords all drilled out of the soil and returned to his body. Then, he looked around and quickly sank into the ground, entering a spherical space a few hundred meters underground. He saw Mu Bing lying on the ground, applying medicine on the wound on his stomach. He was still moaning in pain. Mu Bing, I'm so happy to see you again. Yu Qianqiu took a step forward, raised his foot, and directly stepped on Mu Bing's stomach, which was covered with both hands. Mu Bing's 10 fingers, as well as the medicine bottle, were stomped into the cracked belly. Blood immediately spurted out of the slightly healed wound. Ah! The miserable scream was shrill and piercing, making one's hair stand on end. Yu Qianqiu was not moved at all. He forcefully twisted his foot again until both of Mu Bing's palms were completely stuffed into his cracked belly. Then, he sneered and said, "Didn't you say that there would be a time for me to cry? I'm waiting for you to explode your dantian." When? Mu Bing was in so much pain that he could not catch his breath. How could he have the guts to destroy his body and soul? He looked at Yu Qianqiu in horror, gasping for breath, and said, "Yu Qianqiu, spare me, as long as you let me go. I'll do anything in the future. With Wu Xiong's help, no one in the immortal world will dare to touch you. Who does Wu Xiong think he is?" Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. His right hand pulled out a long sword made of azure fire. He waved the tip of the sword in front of Mu Bing's eyes and said, "Tell me the truth. Why did you come to the netherworld this time?" He still thought that Mu Bing was hiding some secret, but at this time, how could Mu Bing still dare to say that he was here to kill him? But in this moment of hesitation, Yu Qianqiu swung the long sword in his hand and chopped off both of Mu Bing's legs, starting from the ankles. Ugh! Mu Bing's forehead was instantly covered in sweat. His body twisted slightly, and the blood in his abdomen flowed even faster. "Still talking back to me?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and swung the long sword in his hand again, chopping off 2 more legs from the knees. "Ah!" Mu Bing screamed and replied impatiently, "Kill you, hunt you down. I came to hunt you down." "Hunt me down? You think you can find so many netherworld experts to hunt me down?" Yu Qianqiu moved the sword in his hand and the tip hovered over Mu Bing's eyes. He said indifferently, "Without Wu Xiong's support, you wouldn't have been able to find so many netherworld experts to help you. Wu Xiong wouldn't go against the immortal emperor just to kill me, right? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll gouge out one of your eyeballs. Do you believe me?" Chapter 1040. Mu Bing's pupils shrank as the blade swayed slightly in front of his eyes. He had no doubt that Yu Qianqiu was joking. If he was unhappy, Yu Qianqiu's sword would gouge out one of his eyeballs. He hurriedly said, "I deliberately told Wu Xiong that you had once pursued Tianjiao, and that the relationship between the two of you had always been ambiguous. This aroused Wu Xiong's jealousy and made him use his power to help me kill you." Yu Qianqiu choked and was speechless. Let's not talk about whether or not he had an ambiguous relationship with Mu Tianjiao. Even if he did, was this something that a father could say? Not to mention that he didn't. He really couldn't imagine that a father would slander his own daughter's reputation like this. Not to mention him, even the dead Dong Shunlai would never have thought that the problem he couldn't figure out before was actually caused by Wu Xiong's jealousy. It should be known that sometimes, no matter how shrewd a man was, he couldn't stand his woman having an ambiguous relationship with another man. Because of this, he would often do something impulsive that he would regret. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. He didn't think that Mu Bing was lying. He slowly let out a breath and said, I give up. You're even slandering your own daughter. Let me ask you, does Mu Tianjiao know that you came to kill me? No. Wu Xiong and I hid it from her. If she knew, she definitely wouldn't agree, Mu Bing replied hurriedly. Mu Bing replied hurriedly. He blurted it out without thinking, fearing that he would be killed if he didn't answer in time. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu finally felt a little better. Fortunately, he didn't misjudge Mu Tianjiao. It should be known that in his eyes, Mu Tianjiao had always been a woman who was not inferior to men. She wouldn't be so narrow-minded. It would be really disgusting if he met a family of ingrates. The sword in his hand moved away from Mu Bing's eyeballs. He patted Mu Bing's face with the blade and said, I just can't figure it out. How did I offend you? How could you be so vengeful? Even though I'm in the underworld, you still chase after me at all costs. Why? Hee hee. Mu Bing suddenly laughed miserably. He laughed so hard that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He said in a hoarse voice, although I'm incompetent, how can I not see through my daughter's thoughts after raising her for so many years? Who in the world knows her better than I do? Back then, when the two of you left the Divine Ruin Realm, I could tell that Tian Jiao had fallen in love with you. If the two of you were a couple, it would be fine. But now she is married to Wu Xiong. Who is Wu Xiong? He was someone who could be considered powerful even in the Immortal Palace. It was one thing for the lass to go to the World Chamber of Commerce to support you, but she even invited you to the wedding. What kind of occasion was that? It's too obvious. I'm scared. I'm afraid that the lass will do something impulsive and ruin her hard-won happiness. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He somewhat understood. No wonder this old dog deliberately humiliated him at Mu Tianjiao's wedding. So this was the reason. The sword patted his face again and said, but you don't have to tarnish your own daughter's reputation. Aren't you afraid that Wu Xiong's misunderstanding will deepen and ruin your daughter's happiness? As long as you're dead, the lass will stop thinking. I believe that the lass will have a good relationship with Wu Xiong, because the lass's chastity is the best bargaining chip. Mu Bing suddenly roared with a ferocious expression, and the most important point is that I can't stand the sight of you. I, Mu Bing, have suffered for so many years in the immortal world before I could make a name for myself. Why is it that you, a poor boy with nothing, can live better than me? It would be fine if you had a good birth and a good background. But you were just a subordinate of my Four Links Chamber of Commerce. Damn it. I'm afraid that what you said before was just an excuse to comfort yourself. It's true that you're jealous of me. You dog, who do you think you are to compare yourself with me? Who asked you to be so arrogant? Mu Bing's right eyeball flew out with a flick of the sword in his hand. Who asked you to look down on me? The sword in his hand flicked again, and Mu Bing's left eyeball popped out again. Ah. Yu Qianqiu, you. Before Mu Bing could finish roaring in pain, Yu Qianqiu stabbed his sword into his mouth and chewed his tongue. He sneered and said, who asked you to shout at me? Mu Bing's head tilted and he fainted from the pain. Just as Yu Qianqiu pulled out his sword, he suddenly heard someone shouting, Yu Qianqiu, where are you? He couldn't help but be stunned. He thought that it was Mu Bing, whose tongue had been chewed up, who was talking. After listening carefully, he realized that it was Ash-Gray Cloud Xian's voice. He immediately looked up and muttered, this old man has such a good voice. I can still hear him even though I'm hiding so deep underground. With a swing of the sword in his hand, he chopped off the head of the unconscious Mu Bing. Then, he put away the blue fire-flying sword and bent down to grab the bun on Mu Bing's head. Then, he quickly burrowed into the soil above his head. Ash-gray Cloud Xian, who had already burrowed into the half-collapsed underground cave, shouted frantically. He was cleaning up the collapsed area while searching for Yu Qianqiu. He had clearly heard Yu Qianqiu's scolding voice earlier, so why wasn't there any reaction now? If Yu Qianqiu died, he would have to prepare to hide in the netherworld and escape for his life. He wouldn't be able to return to the immortal realm for the rest of his life. Not only would he have to pay back the passionless palace, he would also have to face the constant pursuit. How he wished that Yu Qianqiu would scold him again. It didn't matter how vicious the scolding was, as long as he wasn't dead. Suddenly, Ash-gray Cloud Xian's sharp divine sense detected some movement in the collapsed area in front of him. He was delighted to see Yu Qianqiu bursting out from the ground, holding a bloody head in his hand. It was Mu Bing's. Ash-gray Cloud Xian quickly suppressed the pleasant surprise on his face and said with a cold expression, "Did you kill Mu Bing?" However, he was astonished inwardly. Even after being attacked by several meditation practitioners, including a netherworld emperor at the preliminary stage, they still couldn't kill him. It was a miracle that this guy was still alive. Half of Yu Qianqiu's body was covered in blood. He shook the head in his hand and said with a cold smile, "Do you think he came for me? You are very wrong. I have just interrogated him. The person he wanted to kill is indeed me, but it was Wu Xiong who played tricks behind the scenes. The real target is your heartless palace. I don't know how your heartless palace offended Wu Xiong. Damn it, he wanted to kill me to use the powerful force of the immortal palace to eradicate your heartless palace. I am so unlucky. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have asked the heartless palace to protect me. Don't talk nonsense here. Do you think I will believe your provocation?" Ash-gray Cloud Xian was shocked, but he still said coldly, "It is you who offended Mu Bing. Mu Bing is here for revenge. Touch your conscience when you say this." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and lifted Mu Bing's head. He sneered, "Let's not talk about the others. Do you think he can find an early-stage underworld emperor to help him? In fact, you know that Wu Xiong is behind this. Without Wu Xiong's support, it is still a question whether he can come to Twilight City." Humph. Ash-gray Cloud Xian didn't care. "You have the immortal emperor's decree on you. Wu Xiong doesn't have the guts to oppose the immortal emperor." "That's right. Although Mu Bing has confessed, I don't understand what you said. Wu Xiong is a member of the immortal palace. Why would he take the lead to oppose the immortal emperor? Could it be that he was tired of living? I don't get it, I don't get it." Yu Qianqiu shook his head. Suddenly, he was startled and revealed a suspicious expression. "I say, old Ash-gray, do you think the immortal palace doesn't want your heartless palace to grow, so they sent me here to compose a song?" In reality, it was all planned. They just wanted to sacrifice me to find an excuse to take care of the heartless palace in the open. Ash-gray Cloud Xian couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. He even suspected that the immortal palace was aware of sect master Wang Qing's secret, so they planned this. However, he thought of a suspicious point and calmed down in the blink of an eye. He snorted, "Don't try to sow discord here. You were the one who wanted me to protect you, so the immortal palace gave the decree to the heartless palace. Could it be that you have already colluded with the immortal palace and even sacrificed your life to be loyal to the immortal palace? It would have been fine if you didn't say it, but I'm even more suspicious now." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his blood-stained chin. "You know about the Great Bright Wheel, right? What does this have to do with the Great Bright Wheel?" Ash-gray Cloud Xian squinted his eyes and asked. "The immortal emperor ordered me to compose a song, and the person who passed the decree was the Great Bright Wheel. What's so strange about that? The Great Bright Wheel is in charge of the Immortal World Commerce Alliance, and the illusionary Immortal City is his territory. Your World Commerce Alliance is in his territory, so it's normal to find him to pass the decree," Ash-gray Cloud Xian said calmly. "That's normal, but now that I think about it, the most abnormal thing is that he was the one who asked me to come out to collect new things. When I was worried that we would become enemies and that you would secretly plot against me, he suggested that I find you to protect me. He said that you have mastered the Heartless Palace's 3 swords into 1 sword drawing style. With your protection, few people in the world can touch me, so it's definitely safe. Yu Qianqiu put his head behind his back and said suspiciously, and I was worried that you wouldn't agree, but he told me to find you first. If you didn't agree, he would think of a way to ask for a decree from the Immortal Palace and have the Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing pressure you. At that time, you would have no choice but to agree. Because he is friends with Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu, I believed him. You know what happened next. Ash Gray Cloud Xian was shocked when he heard this, and he gritted his teeth as he muttered to himself, so this was all a trap that was already planned, F***ck. I only realized it now. I clearly knew that if I begged you, you definitely wouldn't agree to protect me, but I was still foolishly tricked by him to find you, thinking that I could disgust you. Now that I think about it, the advantage of doing this is to get rid of their suspicion. It's easy to announce to the public that I begged you but couldn't, so I begged the Immortal Palace. And for the Immortal Emperor's wedding, the Immortal Palace had no choice but to fulfill my request and send a decree to the Heartless Palace. Chapter 1041. At this point, Yu Qianqiu suddenly took out his empty hand from his back and slapped his thigh. He exclaimed in shock, "Oh my God! The Chamber of Commerce's Great Bright will master, the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong, and they even mobilized an early-stage Underworld Emperor expert in the Underworld. Even the Dark Army is involved. Could it be that such a large force is working together just to kill me, Yu Qianqiu? What a joke! They think too highly of me, Yu Qianqiu." He frowned and turned to Tsang Yunxin, who was frowning in thought. He hit his chest with the back of his hand and asked, "Old Tsang, help me analyze this. You see, such a large force is definitely not something an ordinary person can control. Do you think that Immortal Emperor Jin Tai is behind all this? Otherwise, who would be able to mobilize these people?" Your expression changed. Could I have guessed correctly? Is it really against your Heartless Palace? Then I'm being wronged. Tsang Yunxin's expression did change. After being analyzed by Yu Yang's vicious mouth and the facts laid out in front of him, it was hard not to believe it. He couldn't help but connect all the things that had happened from start to finish and think about it. The Immortal Emperor suddenly issued a decree to a small world Chamber of Commerce master to have him compose for the Immortal Emperor's wedding. This was an unimaginable matter, and many people still couldn't understand it. Then, the Great Bright Will instigated Yu Qianqiu to seek his protection. This was believable. Unless Yu Qianqiu was an idiot, he would be able to figure it out even if he used his ass to think. It was absolutely impossible for Yu Qianqiu to agree. If it wasn't for someone's instigation, if Yu Qianqiu really wanted Yi Futian to protect him, he could have directly asked the Immortal Palace for help. Why did he have to go around in a roundabout way to humiliate himself and then ask the Immortal Palace for help? Was there something wrong with his brain? With this scoundrel's craftiness, he definitely wouldn't do such a stupid thing. The Great Bright Will clearly wanted to get rid of the suspicion that the Immortal Palace was behind this. At the same time, the sect happened to monitor the Great Bright Will visiting the World Chamber of Commerce several times. Normally, it would be difficult for a large sect to invite him, let alone visit the World Chamber of Commerce so frequently. After he refused, the Immortal Palace used Yu Qianqiu's mouth to issue a decree to the Heartless Palace to force him to protect Yu Qianqiu. The most ridiculous thing was that when something happened to a minor character like Yu Qianqiu, the entire Heartless Palace would be implicated. The reason was that he was afraid he wouldn't protect Yu Qianqiu and would miss the Immortal Emperor's wedding ceremony. The decree was equivalent to the Heartless Palace falling into a trap. The rest would be easy. They just had to kill Yu Qianqiu. The reason why they were beating around the bush was that the Immortal Palace wanted to find a justifiable excuse to attack the Heartless Palace. Otherwise, they were afraid that the sects in the celestial world would be in a state of panic, which would be detrimental to their rule. It should be known that the previous few top sects in the celestial world had been eliminated by the Immortal Palace with a justifiable excuse. The higher-ups of the Heartless Palace, led by sect master Wang Qing, had already expected this. However, they didn't expect it to be this fast. The Immortal Palace was already prepared to act. Hee. Looks like I've really been implicated by the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianqiu stared at Grey Cloud Xian and gritted his teeth. In his heart, he was secretly apologizing to Great Bright Luan. In order to increase his credibility, he hoped that Great Bright Luan would understand. At the same time, he felt that Great Bright Luan should be able to understand. Anyway, now that things had come to this, he understood that he wasn't just Grey Cloud Xian's enemy. The Heartless Palace wouldn't let him go either. Thus, he took this opportunity to provoke the Heartless Palace. If he could force the Heartless Palace to rebel, then the Immortal Palace would help him take care of this troublesome matter. The Heartless Palace wouldn't just sit and wait for death. They were a bunch of powerful people. Implicated you? Humph. If I didn't save you, you'd be dead. Grey Cloud Xian quickly regained his composure. He didn't admit or deny that the Immortal Palace was targeting the Heartless Palace. He naturally wouldn't spread this kind of thing. Instead, he stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. You killed Wu Xiong's father-in-law. You should think about how to explain this to Wu Xiong. What do I have to explain to him? Who saw me kill Mu Bing? Yu Qianqiu raised Mu Bing's head and sneered. It was clearly those people from Dongshan who killed Mu Bing. Don't act like nothing happened. You and I both know the reason behind this. The Immortal Palace must also know that we killed him. Not only will framing me benefit, but it will also buy time for the Heartless Palace to prepare. As long as the cover isn't lifted, the Immortal Palace won't have a legitimate reason to act against the Heartless Palace. You should be thanking me. Although he said this, only he knew the real reason. Once the news of Mu Bing's death reached the immortal world, as long as Wu Xiong wasn't stupid, he should know that Wu Xiong dared to kill his father-in-law. Wu Xiong would naturally understand that Wu Xiong had something on him. If Wu Xiong still acted rashly, then he would try and see what the consequences would be if the immortal emperor found out. Wu Xiong should know which was more important. Currently, the one who posed the least threat was Wu Xiong. Hearing this, Sangyin Xian's eyes flickered. Although he didn't say anything, he understood that at the moment, this was indeed the best way to prevent the Immortal Palace from directly acting against the Heartless Palace. Just as Yu Qianqiu said, it could delay the outbreak of the crisis and allow the Heartless Palace to make more preparations. After letting out a slight sigh, he looked at Yu Qianqiu, whose chest and mouth were covered in blood. He frowned slightly and said, "You're injured like this, are you all right?" To him, Yu Qianqiu couldn't have anything happen to Yu Qianqiu, especially after he thought he knew the truth about the Immortal Palace targeting the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianqiu touched the blood scab on his chin and smiled sheepishly. It's not the first time I've been injured. Injuries, I get used to them. I recover quickly. I'm almost healed. Sangyin Xian was stunned. He looked him up and down with some disbelief. Anyone who was beaten to the point of vomiting so much blood, how could they recover so quickly? Seeing that he didn't believe him, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to reveal the miraculous effects of the golden bead to him. He quickly shook the head in his hand and changed the topic. Let's go. It's time to let the people outside know the truth. He flashed towards the exit, and Sangyin Xian followed. After the two of them flashed out of the ground, Yu Qianqiu flew directly to the broken statue standing in the center of Twilight City, ignoring the surprised and doubtful gazes around him. He landed on the top of the giant statue, looked around, and immediately stared speechlessly at the ruins of half of the city. After a while, he tilted his head and looked at Sangyin Xian, who had landed beside him. He guessed that this old man had pulled out that shocking sword to scare people again. Withdrawing his gaze from Sangyin Xian, he raised the head in his hand to the crowd and shouted at General Lu, "General Lu, your men colluded with Dong Shunlai and the others to kill the people of the immortal world. The heads are here. How do you explain that?" Humph. Ridiculous. Who can testify to that? General Lu gritted his teeth and said, "I suspect that you were the one who killed him and framed my men." Lu. Sunyin Xian shouted coldly. His right hand touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist. He took a step forward and said, "You took Mu Bing and the others out of the prison ahead of time, and Yu Qianqiu was locked in a cage by you. I only rescued him from the cage just now. How did he kill Mu Bing? Although the 7 criminals have already been killed by my sword, their frantic escape is obvious to everyone. Don't tell me you still want to lie through your teeth. Justice is clear. If you dare to brazenly accuse others, I, Sunyin Xian, will not let you off even if I have to die." Yu Qianqiu was very pleased to hear this. His previous persuasion work hadn't been in vain. This was the first time that this old man had taken the initiative to cooperate with him. Furthermore, his reasoning was so reasonable and well-founded that Yu Qianqiu's suspicions were cleared. Now, no one would believe that he was the culprit except for the mastermind behind the scenes. However, General Lu was one of the masterminds behind the scenes. He naturally knew that no one else could have killed Mu Bing. There was no one else but Yu Qianqiu. However, the inside story could not be made public. Moreover, Sunyin Xian was clearly threatening him, so he could only suffer in silence. He secretly clenched his teeth and said slowly, after hearing Master Tsang's words, "This reminds me that Yu Qianqiu is indeed still locked in a cage and unable to commit murder. Perhaps there is some inside story behind this. I will definitely get to the bottom of this." Many of the onlookers thought that there was a grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Mu Bing and thought that it was very likely that Yu Qianqiu had killed Mu Bing. However, even General Lu said that Yu Qianqiu could not commit murder while locked in a cage, so they immediately dispelled this idea. For a moment, they began to wonder if the Onyx army had colluded with outsiders to commit murder. But why? Sunyin Xian snorted coldly and said nothing more. Both sides knew that this matter would be investigated, but there was no time limit at all. It would definitely be investigated until the end. However, neither he nor Yu Qianqiu wanted to be entangled in this matter as long as they were not implicated. Master Tsang. General Lu, who was floating in the air ahead, suddenly spoke again. "In addition to the 7 murderers who were killed, more than half of Twilight City has been destroyed, and so many cultivators of the Immortal and Netherworld have been killed by you. Although it was an unintentional mistake, this is my territory. How do you expect me to explain to my superiors that such a big thing has happened?" Sunyin Xian immediately narrowed his eyes and stared at him. It was obvious that the other party had suffered a loss just now and was now looking for trouble. In the Immortal and Netherworld, it had always been the strong who had the final say. Those who had connections, ability, and background would naturally settle the score with him afterward. Those who did not have the ability could only blame it on their bad luck. There was no need for him to stand up for them. However, this was someone else's territory, and he had indeed destroyed Twilight City. If someone insisted on making things difficult for him, it would be understandable. "What do you want?" Sunyin Xian said indifferently. General Lu glanced at Yu Qianqiu meaningfully and then replied, "Master Tsang, it was an unintentional mistake, but I dare not make the decision on my own. I have to report back to my superiors and wait for their instructions before making a decision. Before that, please cooperate with me and don't leave Twilight City for the time being. Otherwise, it will be difficult to find you." Chapter 1042. As he said this, the thousands of soldiers of the Onyx army behind him slowly formed a battle formation and floated in the air. This was a blatant threat. Previously, Sunyin Xian had threatened him, so he immediately retaliated. In fact, he did not want to threaten Sunyin Xian. Who knew if Sunyin Xian would attack him? That was a matter of life and death. However, if he did not regain his lost face, he would not only lose his own face, but also the face of the entire Onyx army. He could not afford to bear such a heavy responsibility. Of course, there was another reason. Yu Qianqiu secretly cursed. What did Sunyin Xian killing people and destroying Twilight City have to do with him? He immediately guessed the intention of General Lu. The other party obviously saw that the assassination attempt on him had failed. With Tsangyin Exine present, it would not be good for him to act on his own. He needed to ask for instructions on how to proceed next, so he left him behind. The night wind blew like a tide, and the sound of waves in the distance was faint. The two standing on the high afterimage looked at each other. It was not difficult to force their way out of the encirclement of the Onyx army, but the consequences were serious. This was tantamount to going against the entire Onyx army of the underworld. At this point, they could only take one step at a time. After the two secretly discussed, Tsangyin Exine could not show weakness. Yu Qianqiu then laughed and said, "We were going to stay in Twilight City for a few days, but General Lu had better hurry up and ask for instructions. We will not wait after that." "That's good. Guards." General Lu turned back and shouted, "Send 100 capable men to protect them so that no one will disturb them." After saying this, he flashed back. The thousands of soldiers of the Onyx army in the air also left one after another, leaving only 100 of them. Everyone knew that the protection was fake, but the surveillance was real. The crowd gradually dispersed. Half of Twilight City had been destroyed. Many people had to deal with the aftermath and ask for instructions from the higher-ups on how to deal with this matter. Of course, it was not that everyone had no temper, but because Tsangyin Exine's sword was too terrifying. Otherwise, Tsangyin Exine would have been surrounded and beaten up. "Old Song, the hidden dragon manor's territory seems to have been destroyed by you. Where should we go?" Yu Qianqiu looked around the ruins and smiled bitterly. "Old Song, it seems like you've destroyed the hidden dragon manor's territory. Speak of the devil." Ding Xiang, who was in a sorry state, flew over and stood in front of the two. He stared at Tsangyin Exine and said through gritted teeth, "Tsangyin Exine, nearly half of my disciples died under your sword. Even I almost lost my life. How do you explain this?" He was relatively unlucky. Because he did not want to get involved in the matters of these two people, he did not come out to watch the show for fear of being implicated. In the end, he was almost killed by a single sword strike from Tsangyin Exine. Fortunately, he was lucky enough to escape. It wasn't that he felt sorry for his dead disciples, but that he wanted to vent his anger. "You are also clear about the matter. It is useless for me to explain. If there is anything, you can ask your hidden dragon villa to discuss it with my heartless palace. I don't have time to talk to you endlessly. If you continue to be so long-winded, I don't mind killing one more." Tsangyin Exine snorted coldly and revealed his dominance. Ding Xiang immediately lost his temper. At the side, Yu Qianqiu looked at Ding Xiang and chuckled. He thought to himself, "Aren't you looking for trouble for yourself?" He Jinquang and Shen Yu quickly flew over. He Jinquang's face was abnormally excited. He did not feel a headache because Tsangyin Exine had caused trouble. Instead, he cupped his hands respectfully and said, "High Priest, I have already ordered my disciples to clean up the rooms. There are too many people here. Why don't you come to our place to rest?" The Heartless Palace's business was located in the opposite direction of the destroyed area, so it was fine. They could only do this. Under He Jinquang's lead, the few of them quickly flew to the Heartless Palace's business. Ding Xiang, who was in a sorry state, was left speechless. Around the Heartless Palace's business, the hundreds of soldiers of the Dark Underworld Army were blatantly monitoring the surroundings. After He Jinquang personally arranged their accommodations, Tsangyin Exine took the opportunity when Yu Qianqiu led Shen Yu to check the living environment to signal He Jinquang. The two of them were about to leave when Yu Qianqiu, who was strolling around with his hands behind his back, looked back and smiled. He had roughly guessed what Tsangyin Exine was going to do. He immediately shouted, "Elder He, please wait." The two of them stopped and turned around. He Jinquang smiled in confusion and said, "What orders does sect leader you have?" Yu Qianqiu walked over with Mu Bing's head in his hand. He said, "Elder He, please arrange for someone to send this to Wu Xiong of the Immortal Palace. Tell him that I passed it to him. Also, help me pass a message to Wu Xiong and his wife. Tell them that my ability is limited and I could not save Mu Bing's life. I could not even keep his corpse intact. I am ashamed that only his head was left." This. He Jinquang immediately looked at Sungyin Xian awkwardly. What a joke. How could he interfere in something like this? Sungyin Xian fell silent for a moment. Then, he frowned and said, I can arrange for someone to bring Mu Bing's head over for you, but to pass a message. Why don't you leave a message in a jade archive and pass it to Wu Xiong and his wife along with Mu Bing's head? Yu Qianqiu understood He Jinquang's concerns. He chuckled and took out a jade archive. He wrote a few words on it, then passed it to He Jinquang along with Mu Bing's head. Since Sungyin Xian had instructed him to do so, He Jinquang could only reluctantly accept these two items. Inside the secret chamber of Unrequited Love Palace's branch, Sungyin Xian solemnly laid down a soundproof enchantment the moment he entered. Then, he took out a jade archive. After some thought, he wrote quite a few things on it. After he was done, he carefully checked it a few times. Then, he added a special restriction of Unrequited Love Palace onto the jade archive. He Jinquang's eyelids twitched. He knew that this restriction was a self-destruct restriction. If someone didn't know how to undo it and forcefully opened it, the contents of the jade archive would immediately self-destruct. Even he, an elder, wouldn't be able to undo it. Sungyin Xian handed the jade archive over and said in a deep voice, Bring some people with you and return to the immortal realm immediately. You must personally deliver this jade archive to the sect master. Remember, it can only be handed over to the sect master. It cannot fall into anyone else's hands. If you run into any trouble along the way, you can say that you were entrusted by Yu Qianqiu to deliver Mu Bing's head to Wu Xiong. If you run into any trouble that you can't solve, destroy this jade archive immediately. It cannot fall into anyone else's hands. This is an important matter. Do you understand? If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't send messages across the two realms, and that he couldn't leave this place for the time being, he wouldn't have handed over the contents of this jade archive to someone else. He Jinquang's expression turned solemn. To think that this was something that couldn't be handed over and could only be presented directly to the sect master, Unrequited Love Palace. He didn't even need to think to know that it was something extremely important. He immediately nodded and said, Don't worry, High Deacon. I know what to do. After Sungyin Xian reminded him again, the two of them left the secret room together. He Jinquang then quickly arranged the matters here. He himself picked dozens of people and quickly flew out of Twilight City. They weren't the only ones who left Twilight City at the same time. Since the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld couldn't send messages directly, the other sects had sent people back to the Immortal Realm to report what had happened here. In this way, everyone could travel together on the way, reducing a lot of risk. Yu Qianqiu leaned against the stone window. After seeing He Jinquang leave with his people, he turned around and walked at Sungyin Xian, who had just entered the room, as if nothing had happened. He was a little puzzled and said, I didn't expect so many sects to send people to guard Twilight City. I wonder what kind of business everyone is doing here. Sungyin Xian didn't hide anything and told him directly, since the Netherworld had a rule since ancient times, people from the Netherworld were not allowed to do business with the Immortal Realm. Twilight City was actually a black market trading center under the command of the army of the Netherworld. People from the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld had to abide by the rules if they wanted to do business here. The so-called rules were because there was the protection of the army of the Netherworld here, so people could trade with peace of mind. Therefore, protection fees must be paid. If they didn't pay, they wouldn't be able to survive here. As for what to trade between the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld, what the Netherworld lacked the most were all kinds of weapons and magic treasures. It had to be known that the Netherworld was vast and had a large population. There were often fights and killings, so the consumption of weapons and magic treasures was a huge number. Unfortunately, weapons and magic treasures must be refined by controlling fire. However, fire was the natural nemesis of meditation, which became the biggest obstacle for meditation cultivators to refine magic treasures and weapons. However, these obstacles were not a problem at all for the cultivators of the Immortal Realm. If you meditation cultivators want it, we can refine it for you. Of course, we can't give it to you for free. Naturally, you have to pay the price. Therefore, the netherworld was extremely rich in reserves, and the spirit stones that the cultivators of the immortal realm needed became the best trading item. At the same time, you could find some rare minerals and metals in the immortal realm in the netherworld, which were all needed for refining magic treasures. A buyer and a seller's market was formed. Those who could do business in Twilight City were some of the top sects among the tens of thousands of sects in the immortal realm. As for those small sects, it was a problem whether they could reach here safely. They were afraid that before the transaction was completed, the things in their hands would have been snatched away. Therefore, those small sects and small merchants only dared to look for business opportunities not too far from the entrance to the netherworld. But then again, the small sects and small chambers of commerce almost didn't have anything good in their hands. The various forces in the netherworld didn't care about their things, and the rich reserves of spirit stone mines in the netherworld were mostly controlled by the various forces. Those small sects could only find some scattered small forces or loose cultivators to do business with. This was a vicious cycle. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slowly and frowned. If that's the case, wouldn't the big refining sects in the immortal realm, such as the mythical fire palace, make a fortune? Sunyan Xian couldn't help but sneer. Making a fortune depends on one's ability. As long as the mythical fire palace has the guts to eat it alone, no one will say anything. Yu Qianqiu was startled and thought about it. If the mythical fire palace cut off everyone's source of wealth, it would be strange if everyone did not join forces to kill it. However, thinking of the big sects making a fortune here, he couldn't help but feel a little itchy. He rubbed his hands and asked, I wonder if the World Chamber of Commerce can send some people to Twilight City to do business? Chapter 1043. There's nothing you can't do, as long as you have the ability to settle any trouble in the underworld. But Sunyan Xian looked out the window and said lightly, you should think of a way to get through this first. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's heart immediately stopped itching. His expression twitched. He wasn't afraid of trouble, but he couldn't make a fortune here if he didn't settle the trouble with the Onyx army. After all, this was the territory of the Onyx army, and a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. When he was imprisoned, he thought that he didn't have to worry about the Great Ming Wheel's owner token. He could ask the supreme commander of the Onyx army, Madame He Qi, for help. But now, it seemed that he didn't know if Madame He Qi had intervened in this matter, so he couldn't rush to take out the Great Ming Wheel's owner token. However, he had to solve this problem. First, he had to continue looking for Bai Changchun in the underworld. Even if he didn't look for Bai Changchun, he couldn't never come to the underworld again. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He suddenly remembered the woman with half her face covered by a black veil. He remembered that the underworld saintess had given Yu Ji a token, saying that it could help her when she was in trouble. He wondered if it was true or not. Old song. Have you heard of the underworld saintess? Yu Qianqiu asked as he rubbed his chin. Sunyan Xian and Shin Yu looked at him almost at the same time, their expressions a little stunned. Sunyan Xian asked suspiciously, the underworld saintess? I've heard of her, but no one has seen her before. It's said that this woman has always lived in seclusion and is even more mysterious than the emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi. She has a very high status in the underworld royal palace. Why are you asking about her? Don't tell me you know the underworld saintess. Shin Yu also looked suspicious. I really do know her. Yu Qianqiu shrugged at the two non-committally. It was fine as long as he confirmed that the underworld saintess was as powerful as she said. He changed the topic. After a while, he suddenly asked Sunyan Xian mysteriously, do you have a secluded place that I can borrow? The kind where I won't be disturbed. What for? Sunyan Xian was puzzled. Why are you asking so many questions? I have my own uses for it, Yu Qianqiu said mysteriously. Grey Cloud Xian looked slightly unhappy and said in a deep voice, follow me. After saying that, he walked out. Yu Qianqiu waved at Jiu Yu, indicating for him to follow. Sunyan Xian led the two of them to the secret underground chamber. He wanted to see what Yu Qianqiu was up to. However, Yu Qianqiu said to him in a righteous tone, "Personal privacy. No peeking." Sangyan Xian immediately flung his sleeves and walked out angrily. Shen Yu was very self-aware. He wanted to respect Yu Qianqiu's privacy, but Yu Qianqiu pointed at him and shouted, "Help me guard the door. Don't let anyone peek in." Shen Yu nodded and stood guard outside the door. Yu Qianqiu sealed the stone door of the underground chamber. After checking around the room, he suddenly disappeared inside. In the ghost realm of the human realm, under the gloomy clouds and the chilly wind, Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared outside the Ghost King's hall. He strode towards the Ghost King's hall. The ghost cultivators guarding outside immediately knelt down in fear and trepidation to greet him. Before walking up the steps of the Ghost King's hall, Yu Ji and the rest were startled by the 3 words, "Torture Envoy." With Yu Ji leading the way, they all rushed outside to greet him. "Rise." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand calmly at the crowd. He then pointed at Yu Ji and smiled. "Come with me." The group of people slowly stood up with a respectful expression. "Yes." Yu Ji followed behind Yu Qianqiu. The two of them walked up the steps in front of the Ghost King's hall and disappeared into the depths of the palace. After walking to the center of the hall, Yu Qianqiu stopped and looked around the Ghost King's hall. He found that it was still the same as before. There was no change at all. Yu Ji stood behind him and cupped her fists. "Yu Ji awaits your orders?" Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked at the beautiful lady in front of him. He could still vaguely remember the scene when they first met. He smiled. "I'm here to borrow something from you. Do you still have the token that the underworld saintess gave you?" Yu Ji was slightly startled, then she quickly took out the black token that was less than the size of a palm from the storage bag at her waist and handed it over with both hands. Yu Qianqiu took it and looked at it again. On one side was a cloud pattern, and on the other side was a mountain. There were 6 peaks on the mountain. The 5 peaks surrounded the highest peak in the center. There was a majestic palace in the middle. The material of the token seemed to be a very rare kind of wood. It was completely black. It was the token that he had seen in the past. In the past, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't have known what the palace on the command token meant. However, his current experience couldn't be compared to the past. After pondering for a moment, he faintly guessed that the palace guarded by the 5 peaks was probably the illustrious Nether Imperial Palace. "I'll borrow it for a while. I'll return it to you when the time comes." Yu Qianqiu put it away with a smile. His eyes inadvertently glanced at the storage bag at her waist. He took out 2 storage bracelets and handed them to her. "I won't lend it to you for free. These 2 bracelets can be used as rent. There are 10 storage spaces in each bracelet. They are more convenient and useful than storage bags." Yu Ji was startled again. She immediately bowed in fear. Yu Ji doesn't dare. To her, the token was of no use at all. If it was not for the fact that Yu Qianqiu had mentioned it, she would have forgotten about it. Even if Yu Qianqiu asked for it, she would not feel anything. How would she dare to accept the rent from the torture envoy? "Just take it. It's not something valuable. I have many of them." Yu Qianqiu grabbed her hand and forcefully shoved it into her hand. However, he was pondering in his heart. If that netherworld saintess wanted to find out why the token ended up in his hands, he would at least have a reason to deal with it. Yu Ji's body could not help but tremble. After so many years, he was the second man who had grabbed her hand. She held the pair of bracelets and bowed. "Thank you, torture envoy." Yu Qianqiu did not want to be polite with her. He smiled and said, "There's something you need to prepare in advance. You need to secretly look for a candidate to take over your position as the Ghost King. Don't announce it for now. Maybe I'll take you out of the demon realm soon." "Ah." Yu Ji suddenly raised her head. Her eyes were full of surprise and anxiety. Most of all, she was confused about the unknown future. "Don't think too much. I'm asking you to do something for me. Of course, this is just my temporary idea. We'll talk about it when the time comes." Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved his hand. All right. I still have something to do. Go ahead. Before Yu Ji could respectfully send him off, Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared from the hall. She could not help but stare at the pair of storage bracelets in her hand in a daze. Why did he give her bracelets? Did the torture envoy fall in love with her? Thinking about it, she felt relieved. Just now, she did not see any lust in the torture envoy's eyes. Moreover, with the power of the torture envoy, he could get any kind of woman he wanted with just a word. Obviously, she had thought too much. She then began to examine the 2 storage bracelets, and discovered that there really were 10 storage spaces within each bracelet. She was pleasantly surprised as she wore the bracelets on her wrists, and after comparing them, she discovered that they were indeed much more useful than storage pouches. The stone door of the secret chamber guarded by Jiao Yu was pushed open with a rumble, and Yu Qianqiu walked out with a smile. Jiao Yu turned around and looked at him in confusion. He had only gone in for such a short time, and he had already come out. He did not know what secret he was doing. The 2 of them walked up the stairs leading to the underground secret chamber and found that Sungyin Xian was guarding outside with his hands behind his back. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "Why are you looking at me like that?" "I've been thinking about a problem. You've been neglecting your work. The date of the immortal emperor's wedding is not far away. Let's see how you're going to explain it then." Sungyin Xian sneered. Yu Qianqiu climbed up the last stone step. He held his stomach with both hands and chuckled. "You don't understand. Walking around and seeing more can increase the inspiration for composing. The reason why I wanted to find a place where no one would disturb me was that I suddenly had good inspiration and needed to sort it out." After that, he slowly walked away. Sungyin Xian looked at his back skeptically. The 3 of them stayed in the same room for a whole day. Yu Qianqiu, who was sleeping soundly with his head covered, suddenly sat up. The other 2 people sitting cross-legged looked at him in confusion. Yu Qianqiu jumped off the stone bed, looked out the window, and said in a deep voice, "What the hell is that Lu Lin doing? He hasn't reported back after waiting for a whole day. I still have things to do and don't have time to play with him." They had now figured out the name of General Lu. "Then what do you want? Do you really have the guts to go against the army of Onyx? They don't care if you have the immortal emperor's Dharma body or not," Sungyin Xian said disdainfully. "If a tiger doesn't show its might, you think I'm a sick cat. Let's go. Let's go find him." Yu Qianqiu strode outside. He was full of confidence now and was just waiting for a chance to go crazy. He had waited patiently for a day and would not wait another day. Sungyin Xian wanted to stop him and tell him not to be impulsive, but Yu Qianqiu had already flown into the sky. He hurriedly chased after him with Shinyu. "Stop!" A loud shout sounded. 100 figures surrounded the 3 of them from all directions. The leader held a saber at his waist and said coldly, "Where do you want to go?" "Tell that Lu guy to come see me," Yu Qianqiu said with a gloomy expression. The leader said indifferently, "The general is not free right now." Quite arrogant. "Then I'll go see him." Yu Qianqiu's body moved, and the leading general pulled out his saber with a clang. The surrounding 100 soldiers immediately pulled out their sabers in a threatening manner. This immediately attracted many people to fly into the sky to watch. "Get lost!" Yu Qianqiu shouted and slapped with one palm. Countless purple flame high-energy sabers immediately spun around him like a tornado, wrapping him up and rushing forward. He did not suppress the terrifying aura that could make the meditation cultivators' hearts palpitate. The people who blocked him did not know the depth of his aura and immediately dodged in shock. Sungyin Xian was shocked. What was wrong with this kid? He dared to attack the Onyx army without a word. Jiao Yu and Sungyin Xian quickly followed. The meditation cultivator general who dodged did not dare to forcibly stop Sungyin Xian without receiving a death order, so he let the 2 pass. However, he then took out a black horn, raised it in front of his mouth, and blew it. The dull sound of the horn immediately resounded throughout Twilight City. Countless people were startled by the battle horn of the Onyx army and flew into the sky to see what was going on. More than 1,000 soldiers of the Onyx army quickly flew into the sky with a murderous aura. General Lu Lin, who was leading them, strode out of the city guard's mansion. Yu Qianzhou and the other two stood at the gate of the city guard's mansion. Sanyan Xian and Zhou Yu looked at Yu Qianzhou in front of them with some bewilderment. They did not know what this guy wanted to do. The surrounding crowd looked at the three of them in shock. They were a little worried that Sanyan Xian would make a move again and cause trouble for everyone. General Lu Lin looked at the three of them with burning eyes and said in a deep voice, "What's going on?" The general who blew the horn quickly came over and reported, "General, Yu Qianzhou said he wants to see you. I told you that the general is not free, but he attacked the Onyx army." Lu Lin suddenly stared at Yu Qianzhou, and he sneered repeatedly. "How audacious of you to dare make a move against my Onyx army. Do you really think we're just there for show? Don't talk nonsense here." Yu Qianzhou stood with his hands behind his back and said expressionlessly, "I gave Madame He Chi face and waited patiently for a day. Didn't you say you were going to report to the higher-ups? I'm here to listen to your higher-ups' decision. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first." Lu Lin completely ignored Yu Qianzhou and only stared coldly at Sanyan Xian. "Consecrator Sanyan, I only have one question for you. Are you going to stay and wait for instructions from our higher-ups, or are you going to accompany Yu Qianzhou and force your way out?" The threat in his words was very strong. Sanyan Xian's eyes flickered. It was easy to charge out, but he couldn't escape forever. The Onyx army was filled with experts. He was afraid that once he charged out, he would immediately be chased endlessly. "I'm giving you face, but you don't want it." Yu Qianzhou laughed coldly. He reached out with one hand from behind his back, and the hand inside his sleeve grabbed a black token. He slowly walked toward Lu Lin and said in a deep voice, "Open your dog eyes wide and take a good look." He guessed that the underworld saintess wouldn't fool people. He just didn't know how much trouble this token could solve. However, he believed that even if this token wasn't very useful, it could at least make the Onyx army wary and not dare to act recklessly. Lu Lin didn't care at all. He stared at Sanyan Xian and was about to interrogate him when the expressions of the soldiers beside him changed at the same time. Suddenly, all of them knelt down on one knee toward Yu Qianzhou. "What are you doing?" Lu Lin was startled and shouted to his left and right. "General, it's the Onyx Emperor's token." Someone beside him transmitted his voice in a trembling voice. When Yu Qianzhou saw the kneeling soldiers, he was immediately emboldened. He laughed coldly and said, "How audacious of you to disregard the token in my hand. I want to see how many heads you have." When Lu Lin's gaze shifted to the token in Yu Qianzhou's hand, he was immediately stunned by the pattern of 5 peaks surrounding and protecting the main peak. That was obviously the Onyx Emperor Mountain. Especially the material of the token. It was made from the dark wood found in the dark wood forest in the back palace of the Onyx Royal Palace. In the entire netherworld, only the place where the Onyx Emperor resided would have dark wood growing. There was no way to fake it. He immediately cried out involuntarily, "The Onyx Emperor's token." Trembling, he bent his knees and knelt on the ground with a thud. He said in a trembling voice, "Your subordinate Lu Lin didn't know that you were coming. I deserve to die 10,000 times for my crime." When he knelt down, coupled with the words, "Onyx Emperor's token," the 1,000 soldiers in the sky immediately changed their expressions. They all knelt down on one knee and bowed. When this inexplicable scene came out, everyone was shocked. The Onyx Emperor's token. The sky was filled with voices. Whether it was the people from the immortal world or the netherworld, no one dared to be arrogant in the sky. They all flashed down and stood with their hands behind their backs, showing their respect to the reclusive Onyx Emperor. Sanyan Xian and Shinyu looked at Yu Qianzhou with their mouths agape. They couldn't have imagined that Yu Qianzhou would suddenly do this. Yesterday, he was a prisoner of the Onyx army and was almost killed. Today, he made the insufferably arrogant Onyx army submit to him with a wave of his hand. The contrast was too great. The shock in Sanyan Xian's heart was indescribable. This was the legendary Onyx Emperor's token that was personally carved by the Onyx Emperor. It could command the entire netherworld. Although this token couldn't truly command the entire netherworld, how many people in the netherworld would dare to stop this token from going anywhere? It was no different from challenging the authority of the Onyx Emperor. The Onyx Emperor's anger could shake the entire three realms. He couldn't figure out why Yu Qianzhou had the Onyx Emperor's token. This thing couldn't be everywhere. He thought about it over and over again, but he still couldn't figure out how Yu Qianzhou got involved with the Onyx Emperor. In fact, not only them, even Yu Qianzhou was a little surprised. He guessed that this token would have some use, but he just wanted to solve the current problem. Just like Zhang Yunxian said, the day of the immortal emperor's wedding was not far away. It took more than half a month to travel from the entrance of the netherworld to Twilight City. Then, he would have to travel through the endless horizon to find Bai Changchun in the forbidden area of the netherworld. Who knew how much time it would take? Including the time needed to go back and forth, there really wasn't enough time. He couldn't afford to waste time here, so he borrowed the token in Yu Ji's hand, ready to solve the problem quickly. But he never dreamed that it would be the Onyx Emperor's token in his hand, the token that could make the army of the dark underworld surrender at its feet. It was over. Wasn't that Saintess of the netherworld trying to cheat him? How could this thing be given away so casually? The key point was that it was given to a weak ghost cultivator like Yu Ji. Anyone would think that it was definitely not something too valuable. If it wasn't so, how could he take it out and cause such a big commotion? Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly in his heart. At present, he had solved the problem quickly, but this token turned out to be the Onyx Emperor's token. Its power was a bit too much. Looking at the current situation, it was obvious that even an expert at the early stage of the Netherworld Emperor was trembling and kneeling at his feet. He was afraid that there would be more trouble in the future. First of all, once the news reached the ears of the Emperor of the Netherworld, Emperor Bai Qi would definitely find out how the Onyx Emperor's token came into his hands. Maybe he would send people to arrest him. Even if the Emperor of the Netherworld let him go, the immortal Emperor Jin Tai would probably want to find out why he had the Onyx Emperor's token. This was big trouble, and it was very likely that he would lose his foothold in both the immortal world and the netherworld. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.